More than 50 countries worldwide continue to have laws prohibiting the cross-border movement of people living with HIV. Experts say that such laws are discriminatory, contrary to sound public health principles, and are preventing an appropriate global response in the fight against the spread of the virus. The UN Human Rights Office is calling for the repeal of national legislation which imposes blanket restrictions on the entry, stay and residence of people based on their HIV status alone.
There is a need for political will and agreement to prioritize human rights protection in HIV responses. HIV knows no borders. It is therefore important to ensure that international migrants have the same rights as everyone else. A person's HIV status alone should not be seen as a reason for refusing to employ him or her.
Rommel worked in the hospitality service industry for a year in the Middle East.
We were contracted to work as waiters, but we were made to do a different job.
Born and raised in the Philippines, 29-year-old Rommel sought employment through an overseas agency, and as is the global trend, he grabbed at an opportunity to work abroad. He landed a contractual position in the oil-rich Gulf region. Everything was fine until he was notified that his contract would not be renewed and he had to return home because he was HIV positive.
We were about to undergo medical tests because our employer was leaving for France and wanted to bring us. We were made to undergo medical tests, but I was not told that HIV testing was included. I tested HIV positive. What was done to me was inhuman. Instead of treating me well, bodyguards were assigned to watch me in the back of a car that took me straight to a hospital where I was detained.
Rommel says he spent 2 weeks under guard in the hospital waiting for his documentation to be processed.
The doctor just told me, "You're HIV positive, you need to go home." And that was it.
Migrant workers benefit both the country of origin and the host countries. Malu Marin works for a non-governmental organisation that is campaigning against mandatory testing. She says it prevents an appropriate response to the spread of HIV.
Deportation of migrants living with HIV contributes to added stigmatization of migrant workers as carriers of diseases, as vectors of infections.
Rommel is just one of the thousands of unreported cases of migrants deported, denied entry or stay in some countries because of their HIV status. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, says people living with HIV should be treated with dignity and respect, and that differential treatment based on an HIV-positive status is discriminatory.
The lack of respect for human rights, including stigma and discrimination, is fueling the epidemic. It is perhaps the greatest barrier to developing an appropriate global response to HIV.
Mandatory HIV testing is used by some governments as a prerequisite for renewing work permits. Upon receipt of a positive diagnosis, the status of these individuals is often not kept confidential. They're deported on the grounds that they are a public health risk. They could spread HIV in the host country, and they will become a burden on the healthcare system. Such restrictive laws not only affect migrant workers. Tourists, students, asylum seekers, family members and accompanying spouses are also prevented from entering or remaining in these countries. UNAIDS, the United Nations AIDS body, says this reasoning is unacceptable.
You know, one of the major challenges with HIV response in the world today is stigma, discrimination and criminalization. In a nutshell, is issues about human rights, the basic human right of people. And travel restriction is just not allowing people to move freely in the world which is globalized. And we are pushing most of those people not having access to basic services. And for me, it's time to call all the countries to remove travel restriction. We have 51 countries in the world today with travel restriction. We don't need them because we don't have a public health rationale to maintain those measures we have been put there 20 years ago.
Studies have shown that people living with HIV can lead long and productive working lives. Rommel's HIV status and subsequent deportation has changed his fortunes, but he is using his experience to educate others. For many HIV-positive migrant workers like Rommel, they can only hope for fundamental reform globally.